that's my old car. That was my first surfing car. It was a 1925 Hudson that I bought from my uncle for 25 bucks. And we used to take it to San Onofre. It would take all day to get there from Santa Monica. It's about an 80-mile drive, but we'd have flat tires, and it was a big adventure just getting there. So when we went there, we usually would stay 2 or 3 days at least because it was too long a trip otherwise. And we had custom 2x4 racks nailed to the car with inner tubes as instead of shock cords. We had them all tied on with inner tubes, but those old cars had a lot of wood in them, and you could just nail 2x4s to the car. There was your board rack. That was one of a kind. Nobody else had one at that time. I think I was the first guy in the block with a car of any kind. Gas was 10 cents a gallon, I remember that. We used to chip in. It cost us about 50 cents a piece to go down there and back. It would take us all day to get there. Malibu, without question. In those days, between 1937 and 1945, you could always go up there and be assured of a good day of surfing. If there were waves, you'd get on a wave by yourself. You could get out and just have a great day up there, from the third point on. Palos Verdes was good in the winter, and San Onofre. San Onofre was probably mostly in a summer spot. Took south swells. We really didn't know too much about where south swells came from in those days, like they do today. It wasn't the science that it is today, but we knew it. South swells came in the summer from the storms down in Mexico, and in the winter they came from the north. That's all we knew. So winter spots were Palos Verdes and Long Beach, maybe the flood control. In the summer was Malibu and San Onofre. Probably the premier surfer in my mind, was Pete Peterson. He was probably the best all-around waterman at the time, lifeguard, and he was my mentor. He got me my first job. He got me on the Santa Monica lifeguard. Besides being unquestionably the best surfer. I mean, he won every contest. He won every paddling race. Some of his races, he paddled to Catalina. Some of those records still held for years after that. Lauren Whitey Harrison was another one. It was one of the best that I can remember. And there was Bob Butts, Johnny McMahon, Leroy Granis, and Doc Ball. They were in another group. They were from the South Bay. And there was Hoppy Swartz, was also one of the top guys from the Palos Verdes Surfing Club. Those are names that come to mind. There was Thule Clark. He was also a top surfer from that group. Kind of hard to remember some of these guys. I just remember the ones that were close to me. That was one of my first water shots. I had a little box that I made for a 35 millimeter camera. Took it out at San Onofre, and that's Pete Peterson and Lauren Harrison on the right. They're two of the really big name surfers of that day. The other guy's name is Horatio. For some reason I remember that. That's Tom Blake. Little beachcomber there. Tom was a little bit older than the rest of us. He was probably in his 40s there. He's in great shape. He was just always a great innovator, and he was probably the first one to make any radical changes in design and construction of surfboards. He made a hollow board, and he invented the skeg. That's Bud Rice. That was considered a really critical wave in those days. He got his hand over his head, and he's really streaking, like the wave is almost breaking down on him. But those boards, you couldn't do anything except just get them on an angle and go. We had these little rudimentary skegs, and we pointed. You want to go right, you'd point it right when you took off. And if you're lucky, you made it. But usually, Hermosa was a pretty fast-breaking wave. That's Jack Power. You can see him dragging his right foot to try to steer the board and turn it. The first board I had was a redwood. It was a chambered redwood made of laminated redwood. Was hollowed out, so it weighed about 90 pounds instead of 110. And it was the same design, the square tail, 10 feet long, maybe 21 inches wide, 3.5 inches thick, weighed about 90 to 100 pounds, and they were varnished and shaped the way the Hawaiians have been shaping them for 100 years. Nobody made any strides or any innovations until later, and that's how boards were. There were some, then balsa came in. There were skegs. Tom Blake was the one who invented the skeg, but the first ones were very narrow. They were only like 1.5 inches wide and maybe 8 inches long, and they helped some. They kept the board from slipping and sliding on a wave, and you could get it on a little better angle and have a little more control, edge control, but terms like edge control and rails and stuff, we didn't even know what that was all about. It was just, this was the way the Hawaiians made them, and this is the way they're supposed to be made. We didn't know any better. It's amazing how long it took for any progress to be made in that direction. And they're the boards, the old redwood and balsa, standard board of the era. Mostly, there were also some hollow laminated boards in those days too that were hollow redwoods that were laminated. This is George Larson, and there's a hollow board that was made of plywood and a redwood deck. This is Ed Theron, my old pal from high school days. Still see Ed. San Onofre, the old shack, 1939. Jack Quigg, don't know who the other guy, Roy Delp. They were doing a modeling shoot here in Malibu. Bob Butts was one of the Santa Monica lifeguards who got me started surfing. A Sunday at Malibu, I remember that. There was nobody out. There were 4 of us out there. That's Jack Quigg and Roger Boney, Ralph Kiewit, who's still around. Those are the old redwood, 10-foot redwood boards with balsa, redwood sides, nose, and tail with balsa. And we used to hope there'd be somebody out there to go surfing. There was nobody there. It was just, and we used to sometimes leave our boards behind a sand dune and come back up and get it, and just it'd be there the next week. Nobody ever would steal a board. Just a different era. That was really the age of innocence of surfing. That's Pete Peterson at Hermosa Pier. I remember that day he paddled. Pete was one of the prime surfers of the day. He was probably one of the best of all-time watermen. And he tried his whole lunch hour to get out. That was a big day at Hermosa, and he never did make it. He's hitting a backwash there now. There's the other type of board. This is Jim Bailey on his white paddleboard, which we call kook boxes, but there's a difference of opinion there. But they did well with them. Jim Bailey was a barber, and he had his shop on the Strand. He was known to run out on a haircut just to go catch a wave. If he saw a good wave, he'd leave the guy sitting in the chair. But this is what happened to him after this. You can see there's his board broke in half. You can see it. And that's, boards weren't really too well made in those days. They were just plywood and glued together, and they were really kind of a weak construction. They weren't meant for hitting pilings and bouncing around on big waves. Another hollow paddleboard. I don't know who that guy is, but that was about as close as I could ever get with a camera. I remember that one. It felt like he almost hit me. This is a shack at Topanga Beach where we rented it for $60 a month. You see, there are 4 of us there. I think 3 of us were paying $20 a month. We played volleyball and we surfed out there. There's Ralph Kiewit. He's a friend of mine who's still around. It was just before World War II. There's me and there's Jack Quigg. Ed Farron there. That's a balsa board there with that was a Johnny Stinton board. The one that Quigg has got a mahogany deck on it. Gave the board a lot more rigidity and of course it added weight, but it would made it a lot stronger. Now here we are at the Bel Air Bay Club. We had these great jobs in those days. We made $90 a month and we got meals. But those are the cabanas. The wealthy people from Bel Air would come down there and we'd wait on them, and we were beach boys and lifeguards. We used to actually earn enough money in the summers to pay our tuition in college. There's the Bel Air Bay Club crew again. That's me on the left. We always had Hawaiian names on some of these boards. Somebody told me that name. I don't know what it meant, but the other one, kapu, means keep out. Remember that. And those are balsa boards with redwood sides, nose and tail, and stringers, and they're all basically the same shape. Nobody ever figured out that a board shouldn't be shaped any differently than that until Quigg and Simmons came along, That's Pete Peterson. Is shaping my board in his garage. It was balsa and redwood, 11 feet long, weighed about 80 pounds. I remember I was watching him shape it, and I said, Pete, can't you please get it ready for tomorrow? And they used a plane and a draw knife, and it was pretty rudimentary stuff in those days. That looks like Dana Point. Dana Point, where there's a harbor now, used to have a fantastic surf. and it was one of the primo places on the coast. And when they put the harbor in, it just totally wiped it out, of course. And this looks like he's making a radical turn. Look at the size of that board. It's probably 11.5 to 12 foot. It looks like he's making a radical turn, but actually just falling off. That's a place called the Ski Jump. That was considered a big wave in those days. That's one of Doc Ball's, and that was an overhead wave. It was, by Waimea stand, it doesn't look very big, but in those days that was considered a pretty good sized wave. That's the wall with the huge hole in it that was caused by a big storm in the early 30s, before I started surfing, because I remember my first trip up there, that wall was just like that, and it's just like that today. Mrs. Ringe, who owned all of Malibu back in about 1910, built that Adamson estate there in Malibu, right by the pier. Still looks pretty much the same. My first camera was one my dad gave me, a folding camera, and it was an Eastman Kodak, and I saw Doc Ball doing it down there, so I'm going to do this. I want to try to get into this. So it was in about 1937, and I tied it around my neck, paddled out on this board just with a towel around my neck, and just tried to stay in the shallow water so I wouldn't get the camera wet. And just shot pictures, and they were a long ways off. I mean, I said, this isn't going to work. I finally ruined the camera, and I said, well, there's a better way. Doc Ball was making boxes, and I made a little box for a 35mm camera and got out and got a little closer and got some of the ones that you've seen there today, which I was pretty pleased with. My worst wipeout was in 1964, I think it was. I was at Laniakea, and I was with I had a Hasselblad, a big camera, weighed about 30 pounds, and I was out. I was with Peter Cole, and I said, Peter, is this a safe place to be? Peter's vision isn't too good. And he said, yeah, you're okay there, Don. 2 minutes later, a huge set came and just wiped me out. I lost the camera. I had to swim in. I found it on the beach about a half hour later. Some kid brought it up to me. I can remember surf at Palos Verdes Cove, where just gigantic waves just going and paddling out and just looking down over these huge waves, never having the guts to take off. I mean, we couldn't take off with a 10 or 11 foot, 90-pound redwood. You'd just go, it would just be a death, you know, just straight down. But there were guys who were doing it. Tom Blake and Pete Peterson and Granny and some of those really big wave runners were really good at it. That is one of Doc Ball's shots. Now, his quality was superb. I always wanted to try to get photographs as good as Doc's, and I never quite made it because I didn't have the money to buy the equipment. But I finally got there after a number of years. But I always admired him. He was such an innovator and did something nobody else had done. And besides being a dentist, he was one of the reasons I got into dentistry. There's Pete again at Venice, from the Venice Pier. I had a Graflex in. That was, I remember I wanted to try to become as good as Doc Ball. He was my idol. And so I saved up and bought a used Graflex, and I started to get some pretty good quality. Got on the pier and shot down on these two guys. Pete is one of them. He was evidently demonstrating a board to another surfer. I can't remember the guy's name, but the other surfer has the board that says Pete on it, so he's probably going to build that guy a board. In those days, you used to have to get somebody like Pete to make a board for you, unless you made your own. There was one company that was making them called Pacific System Homes. It was a prefab company that made boards in those days, but other than that, they were all just made by individuals in their garage. Well, we went through periods where we were kids, where we were really healthy. We ate real healthy fruit and vegetables and worked out and swam and then got in with a couple of characters that were a little bit on the wild side and started to drink a little bit, like all kids go through, and then later on got into the healthy lifestyle more. But in those days, most of the lifeguards were swimmers, but they weren't really, and they were bodybuilders because they had to be to carry those heavy boards around, but they weren't really into health fitness per se like people are today. They didn't go to gyms and things like that. They got enough exercise and conditioning by swimming and surfing and lifeguarding, and they were pretty healthy men. You can look at the pictures, you can see the builds on these guys. When I was a kid, I used to go hang around the lifeguards because I was interested in surfing, and I learned from them about surfing, and I learned what kind of a board to get. And then as I got through high school, I stayed friends with them, and then when I got to be old enough, I took the test and became a lifeguard myself. They had a great influence on my life. Okay, now that's the old lifeguard truck from Santa Monica Pier. You can see the paddle boards. They had hollow Rogers paddle boards that they used for rescue work, and that they used to go up and down the beach in that thing. And I still remember those guys. That's Bill Bowen there and Fred Bleeker, who's still alive. I talk to him occasionally. That reminds me of my first day at Malibu when I went up with Bob Butts, who was one of the lifeguards, and they asked me if I wanted to go. It was a school day, and I used to surf before school. I said, I'm going to ditch school. This is a chance of a lifetime. So I went up with him, and Jackie Coogan was the one whose house we went through. He was a movie star at the time, and he was married to Betty Grable, who was also a big star at the time. And we went in through his house and at the Colony and carried our boards down the beach and surfed. We had it all to ourselves. A beautiful 5-foot day, beautiful little rights peeling off that point. I'll never forget it. And that was my first day at Malibu. I still remember the ride, the first ride I got. I had an old balsa little potato chip, we used to call them. They're little Stinton spinners. That was my first day there. But the fact that Jackie Coogan, the movie star, was there surfing really made the day. I mean, that was a big thrill. There's a group of surfers on the beach at San Onofre having a campfire and playing guitars. The whole Hawaiian mystique was real prevalent among surfers in those days. Everybody loved Hawaii, and we sang Hawaiian songs, and we all wanted to go there. It was just the ambition of every surfer to go to Hawaii. It was during the Depression, so nobody could afford it. You couldn't go. You couldn't fly there. There were no airlines. You had to go on the Matson line or Lurleen, and that reminds me of Whitey Harrison stowed away 2 or 3 times and made it that way. But they all brought back the stories of surfing big waves at Waikiki, and it was just the dream paradise for every surfer. More of the Hawaiian atmosphere, the Hawaiian mystique. Barney Wilkes and playing the guitar there, and girl doing the hula. No bikinis around in those days, of course, but that was about as racy as they got. Yeah, 2-piece. And look at the old Model A in the back there. Bruce Duncan, that's the other guy with the guitar, and Barney Wilkes. And the other girl's name is Eleanor. I just remember some of these names. They just keep coming back. Now this is Fenton Scholes, this one that he's still surfing. He's in his 70s. That's Palos Verdes. And nobody had any wetsuits in those days. That was a winter day because it only broke in the winter. We used to make our own trunks. We used to make everything. Actually got some pretty good crowds in those days. You can see that there's probably 10 or 12 surfers on that wave. Doc Ball is one of them, and there's Eddie McBride and Joe Quigg. All these names come back out of the past. Well, we're all conscious of girls at that age, and being a lifeguard, they had the pick of the crop. You sit up in your tower, and you get a tan, and you look at the girls go by, and pretty soon you talk to one, and that was a good source of female companionship for all of us in those days. We were cool about it. We didn't admit it, but actually that was a big thing. Nobody ever admitted that they were lifeguards so you could get girls, but it was in everybody's mind, I'm sure. That's Sam Reed, and I don't know who the girl is, but tandem was a big ploy in those days to get girls. And that was really a good thing to be able to get a girl on a paddle, on a board, take her for a paddle. It was a big thrill. And Sam was good enough so he could catch a wave and lift the girl up and take off. Moral climate in those days was pretty Victorian. There were nice girls and there were girls that weren't so nice. And the girl you took home to meet mother, was somebody you didn't talk about anything other than just taking her out to, the moral climate was pretty stringent in those days. This has been Don James, and I hope you enjoyed my movies, and stay tuned for more to come.